Do you want to know how to become a genius like Albert Einstein? We're going to talk about that today. And guess what? Big shocker. No laboratories needed. Albert Einstein is arguably one of the most influential people of our time. And his story and his process is amazing and gives me chills every time I learn about it. I think I've watched every single biography or documentary on Einstein that I can find. He was born in 1879 in Germany. So if you think about that time period, not much had happened in the industrial age. Electricity had been invented, and I think the telephone was, they were just creating the telephone company to bring that globally. But other than that, from where we are today, that was a lot of inventions ago. He wasn't an outstanding student by most standards, and he lived kind of an ordinary life. His dad owned a company, and the company had financial struggles. But eventually, he went to school, and in 1901, he got a job at the Switzerland Patent Office. And his job was to look over the submissions and see if they were worthy of being patented, see if they were different enough, if they would actually work. And so that was his job. And in 1905, he had what they call his miracle year or his amazing year, is when he wrote 4+ papers about these big theories that he had. And at the time, they were kind of not accepted well, and he was kind of not really thought of as a wise or a genius type person. But over time, his papers became popular, and people were able to see that he was changing the way we looked at physics. It's only now that his theories are being proven. And what's so amazing is his process was one of imagination. He didn't go into the lab and produce studies and experiments. He did what he called thought experiments, where what we would kind of just call dreaming. So if we want to be like Einstein, the number one thing we can do is embrace daydreaming. His sense of wonder was his greatest tool. And what got his attention towards science is one of the stories is when he was 5 years old, he was looking at a compass, and he was mesmerized by the needles moving on their own, which if you think about it, like I say, we have lots of electricity and we see things move on their own. But to him, that was magical. And he asked why. And he learned and studied until he understood why those little needles were moving on their own. So the first step to become an Einstein, which, by the way, I think it's funny that, when somebody does something stupid, we might say, "Way to go, Einstein," and we kind of make it a joke like they're dumb. But I don't know where that came from. But really, to be an Einstein is to be one that observes. So number one, observe. Observe the world around you and question it. Question why this happens, or what would happen if the opposite happened. Observation brings about so many questions that we can begin to imagine what those were like. And that's where he started, as he observed, and then he asked why. 2, we talked about daydreaming. What he would do is he would think about something, and he would daydream the process. He would almost like take it from one end to the other. One of the things he did when he was coming up with the theory of relativity was he imagined himself on a train. He imagined, as he was sitting in the train moving at a faster speed, what if that would affect time versus if he were just outside waiting for the train. Now, I think that's most of what his genius was, is that I don't know if I would even come up with that question, but he did. He wondered if time would be different for somebody moving than it was for somebody sitting still. And come to find out, as he followed that daydream all the way through to the end, he could come up with the understanding and the equations that made that true. And that is true, that we do have different timing for movement and for being still. It's amazing. If you've watched the movie Interstellar, you'll understand a lot more about his theory of special relativity. The third thing we can do to become more like Einstein is to learn from other geniuses. There are other people. He was always willing to learn, and he was willing to engage with people that didn't think like him. In fact, there was a very famous kind of feud people talked about where a man named, I'm going to look him up, Niels Bohr, came up with this idea that Einstein called spooky action at a distance. And this is where entangled particles reacted to each other instantaneously. So you hear about entangled particles. What does that mean? But if you think about it, usually there is something over at this end, and it communicates something over here. So this the wind blows, and then the paper might move in the wind. But there's some kind of action over here, and then there's a reaction over here. Something is communicated through those two things, and and there's always time involved in that. But with entangled particles, there is no time, and there is no first and second. They both react at the same time. So we haven't yet come up with why those two, or how those two things could be connected. We just know that that's a real phenomenon. But Einstein didn't believe it, and he fought it, and he tried to come up with the formula that would disprove it because he thought that was so strange. But in the end, it was Bohr that was correct, and we have done studies and tests to prove that over again and again and again. But he was willing to look to other geniuses and to learn from them, and to listen to what they had to say, and to challenge himself through other people's geniuses. He wasn't always just trying to be the best. And so we can look to people around us, people that we admire, look at people that we don't admire, and maybe learn something from those people to help ourselves become more aware, and to learn the best and be the best at who we can be. The last tip is to be an individual. Einstein was not someone that he wasn't revered for a long time, and he wasn't going with the norms. It wasn't normal to think about time changing. It wasn't normal to think about the universe being bigger than just our solar system. He grew up in an age where the universe was thought to what we now believe is just our solar system. He thought outside the box and looked at things in his own way. And because of that, we have so many discoveries and inventions that we can credit him with those findings. All the kinds of lasers. I think even I read somewhere that even paper towels or things like that can be attributed back to some of the findings and to the understandings that Einstein brought to our world. So if you want to be like an Einstein, here's the things: observe, daydream, look to other sources and other geniuses, and then be yourself and discover and imagine in your own way. We all want to be an Einstein, and you can by following these simple steps. Comment below ideas that are maybe crazy to everyone else, and let's just think for a minute. Maybe they're not, and maybe in 100 years, who knows? Science will prove you right. So we'll see you next time.